Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Christine Dixon of The Ordinary Sacred, and this is part 4 in a 4-part series on internal family systems and chronic pain. And so if you haven't watched the first 3, the first one is kind of an overview of mind-body techniques that have helped me with chronic pain and how to use IFS to get to know parts around it. Part 2 is about me getting to know the part who causes pain or is in charge of causing physical pain in my body. Part 3 was about me getting to know, she let me know, Reen, the 11-year-old that causes pain, let me know that there were actually 4 parts she protected, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, and 2 6-year-olds. So last video was about the 5-year-old and really the 4-year-old stuck in medical trauma that I went back and helped and unburdened and retrieved. And this video is about the 2 6-year-olds. And this whole journey, this whole process with this chronic pain has been so fascinating. It's been over months and months and exploring different ways of getting to know the parts. And so in this one, you'll see that I get to know some of these parts through journaling. There's someone named Nicole Sachs, who I highly recommend if you have chronic pain. And she developed something called journal speak, where essentially the hypothesis, the theory is that a lot of times mind, body, physical pain manifests on the outside physically because there are parts who are suppressed or exiled, who don't have a voice to express our authentic truth, which often has to do with anger, guilt, grief, might be disgust, might be just, impulses that are considered aberrations or shameful in the culture. And so anything that's our truth that is suppressed. So she has this technique where you write and you get all of that out and no one else has to see it. You can delete it, rip it up, burn it up right after. But just as long as it's able to be expressed and basically yourself is able to hear it and accept it and love it and give it space, right? It's so healing. So then the body doesn't have to cause the pain anymore. This is very compatible with IFS. And it was through Journal Speak that I got to know the first 6-year-old. And I always want to say here that this is my personal experience. It's not meant to be prescriptive for you. What happened is always unique, right, to the person, because this has to do with my lived experience and how my system arranged around it. You'll see there's so many layers, and some of them you may resonate with. There's religious trauma, cultural burdens, things like that, that you might resonate with. But your experience is always going to be unique. So please always go in and really listen to your own parts, listen to your own body. They will tell you why they're doing what they're doing. So, and as you'll see here, I'm actually going to read this one entry of Journal Speak that I did. And I did many, many over these weeks, every day. And it was a great thing to get my parts to express themselves. But this one was particularly powerful. And you'll see in it that I start by addressing the anger toward the pain, the physical pain, and it begins to morph into something else. And I do want to give a little bit of a content warning here. It does end up going into the part of me that felt responsible for my first husband's death by suicide. And so there's a lot of pain and anguish, and it's pretty raw and vulnerable, but it's a really good example of getting to know a part in this way. And I'm going to just say R for my first husband. And I think I won't use my children's names either. Okay. So I started by asking in the journal, what are you angry about? And I said, you know what I'm angry about? This MF and headache, this pain in the side of my head that was just constant for months and months. It wouldn't go away. And I started writing really aggressively on the paper, large and a lot of pressure. And I said, I hate it so much. I'm so tired of it. I'm afraid of it. I can't stand it. I want out of it, but I have to stay in it. I'm helpless. I don't see a way out except through a very painful door. There's darkness, blackness. Okay, so as I'm talking about the pain and this experience of feeling like I'm in a really painful reality, but I'm helpless. There's no way out except through a painful door. There's darkness, blackness. It was like it brought me right back to being in an abusive relationship for 13 years. And that's exactly how I felt. I'm in this really, really painful, difficult reality, but there's no way out, right? Divorce is not an option in the religion I was brought up in. I just have to stay and endure this. So it's like my system went, ooh, this is the same feeling. So, and then it begins to morph. So it says, is darkness, blackness, everyone will judge me. I'll be a bad mom. Ours life was ruined, and so were my boys. What was I supposed to do? Sacrifice myself? I was. I was supposed to sacrifice myself, but I didn't. I sacrificed them because after 13 years, I finally had the courage and clarity to leave my first marriage that had been very abusive. I told myself I was staying for my children, but finally had the clarity that I needed to leave for my children because I would never, ever wish this kind of relationship upon them. And so I did leave. But what I'm realizing in this is that there are parts who feel like I made a selfish choice in doing that and essentially was then responsible for my first husband's death by suicide a year later, and subsequently how that negatively affected my children. So this part is saying, I'm responsible for that. But what was I supposed to do? Sacrifice myself? Yes. Yes, I was. That's what I was supposed to do. So now she's saying, I'm to blame for ours death and for every problem that my boys ever have. I will never be able to make it up to them. If they ever treat me bad, I deserve it. There's nothing that will ever be enough punishment for me. I deserve to suffer the rest of my life. I deserve pain every day to remind me of what I've taken from them, which is everything. I did not sacrifice myself then, but I am now. It is not okay for me to enjoy my life when I ruined theirs, so I must always be in pain. If I'm not in pain, then I'm just a selfish person and I deserve to die. This is the way that I live. This is fascinating because what a lot of people don't understand is that when there's maybe a self-harming part, which I consider some forms of physical pain to be, it's basically like, if I don't do this, then either parts that hold really unbearable emotional pain will come up, or the next in line is suicide, right? So there's a part that believes that I was selfish to leave my first husband, to leave my first marriage, and that I'm responsible for his death by suicide and for any problems that my children have, and therefore I deserve to die. But instead of dying, if I just have physical pain all the time, that will be enough punishment, and then I'll be allowed to go on living. It's really fascinating as I'm writing this. I mean, this is this part that truly believes this. It's not like all of me believes this, but this part very much believes this. She said, she went on, I can only live if I suffer. And it was this idea of like penance. She said, it's embarrassing to enjoy my life. This is how I die every day to make up for what I did. I don't deserve a pain-free life. I deserve death. I chose myself over R and the boys. I tried to escape a living hell, but then I put them in one. So now I deserve one. And so it's like the constant physical pain and the symptom imperative of constantly having something wrong with my body is, she believes, is what she deserves. Um, and, even though this sounds really intense and extreme and sad, in this moment, as I'm writing this, I'm having aha moments. Oh my gosh, of course she thinks that. Because growing up, whenever I did anything bad, wrong, I was given corporal punishment, physical, bodily pain. So it makes sense that she believes that she deserves pain. And then she went on and said, I'm weak and worn. I must sabotage a good life. My misery makes me feel less selfish. I am paying for my sins. I was supposed to always be good, always consider others as better than myself, trust God, be anxious for nothing, never get angry. But I didn't do that. I failed. I failed R and the boys. I failed my mom and dad. I failed God. I was good most of my life, but then I wasn't. I stopped being good, and now I deserve hell. Sometimes I'd just rather die than know that I cause any kind of pain to others. Um, I don't want to help others because I don't deserve it, and I don't want to hurt others either. I feel deep shame and guilt. I take responsibility for R's death and for any and every bad thing that has happened to my kids. This is why I'm terrified when I don't hear from my child who lives in another city, because if something bad happens, I know it will be all my fault. I am responsible for everything. And again, it's this very extreme thinking of any bad thing that happens to a loved one somehow will always be my fault, right? And so what happened to my first husband is this part's fault. Whatever happens to my children is this part's fault. And so whenever you recognize real extreme thinking, you can ask how old that part is, because it's likely young. And I said, how old are you? And it was a clear, I am 6 years old. And I said, what a heavy weight you carry, the weight of the world. And I feel emotional now, like even reading this, I just have such compassion toward this 6-year-old part who just feels like the weight of the world, right? That everything is her responsibility, everything that goes right or wrong with especially her loved ones, right? And she said, yes, I'm crushed. I feel physical pain to not feel the weight of my guilt. I cannot bear it. And so Reen distracts. And I asked her, does it ever go away? And she said, only when I feel 100% safe. And I asked her what she wanted to be called. And at first I thought she said Pippi, which if any of you are familiar with Pippi Longstocking, she's got the red hair with the pigtail. So that's how I pictured this part. But then she corrected me and she said, no, my name is Pippen, not Pippi. So I adjusted. And then I do also want to read to you in journal speak. Nicole Sachs encourages us to write from the parts and then to respond from self, essentially, with compassion. And I did begin to at the end there, but self also wanted to talk to her and said, beloved, I see your suffering. I see the impossible mountain you are under. You have so much pain, mountains of pain. I know it feels impossible, but you can feel it. I will hold you. I have you now, and I always will. You are never alone. You cannot get it wrong. I know you can't believe this yet, so I will hold it for you. I will always wrap my wings around you, keeping you safe and warm. There's nothing you can do to push me away. R is okay, and your sons will be okay too. I hold them too. You cannot hold responsibility for them, and they do not hold responsibility for you. You each are experimenting with life, and you each cannot get it wrong. Breathe, my child. Rest in me for a few moments. I love you. And because that was a beautiful response from self, from divine love, because Pippen had expressed the only time she could relax is when she felt 100% safe. And so just really giving that message. And then later, Pippen expressed to me that it was easier to take responsibility and to feel, and there's another 6-year-old part I'll talk about in a second that's corollary to Pippen. And it was really interesting because Reen said there were 2 6-year-olds. But Pippin's burden is really taking on the responsibility for other people and particularly loved ones. And there's another part named Sarge that I'll tell you a little bit more about, who wants to control or believes that she has control over everything. And so they were kind of together here, I think, telling me that it was easier to believe that Pippin was responsible for everyone and whatever happened to them, and that Sarge was in control of everything that happened in the world, than the alternative, which was, I don't have any control. I don't have any responsibility over the people in front of me. And I think that around that time, I also have another 6-year-old part named Cassandra, who's the people pleaser part, who's really a parentified child. I think that was about the age at 6 where I felt like I had to take care of my mother. And so these parts took on the alternative of, I don't have any control, I can't be responsible for other people, felt like death, right? That means that I'm going to die. So the alternative was worse in her mind. And like I said before, of course, she believes she deserves physical pain because she was punished. Whenever her caregivers thought that she did something wrong or bad, she was slapped across the face or hit on a bare bottom with a ping pong paddle or with a spoon on the hand, watched her sister be hit several times. So I just communicated to her that she made sense. And then in the coming weeks, I made sure to really meet with Pippin every day. And she's not actually unburdened or really retrieved yet. But I just wanted her to know, I'm here with you, and there's no rush. There's patience around it, not until you're ready. I just have affection for you. I have compassion for you. I have appreciation for this burden that you've carried. And she wasn't ready to release the burden. Some of it, she said, was because she felt loyalty to her mother by carrying the burden of her guilt, which my mother is still very religious, right? And so like a lot, you could see in the journal speak, she started shifting into this religious talk, right? Of I needed to trust God. I needed to be anxious for nothing. I needed to never get angry, right? And her interpretation of never get angry is never set boundaries. Never leave someone because they're mistreating you, because anger is what tells you there's something wrong with the way they're treating me. I need to leave. And she was told that anger was a sin, was a terrible thing. So a lot of the tapes that are playing in her mind were things that her mother would say over and over, my mother would say over and over and over. So it was kind of like a loyalty to her mother that she couldn't release the burden. So I asked her to do an experiment to just put the burden in a locker for a certain period of time, like maybe an hour, and just pretend like she wasn't responsible for everyone and everything, and just to see what happened. And for that hour that she put her burden in the locker and didn't carry it, of being responsible for everyone, I was pain-free for that hour. The pain that I had experienced on the left side of my face for many months was gone for that hour. So that was really fascinating evidence to her, right? So I'm going to skip forward. I did lots of, journal entries during this time. I don't want to give you everything. I did a polarization work with the parts who wanted to go to the dentist and the parts who didn't want to go to the dentist. But I decided to, come back to Pippen at this point to really see how she was doing, if she wanted to release the burden more. She said there was still this piece left from my mom. Sorry, I think in the last one, sorry about that. She did release some of her burden. That's right. It was like this giant mountain of a boulder on her back. And she started to chisel away a little at the boulder. And then like there was this huge vacuum that sucked it up, whatever had broken off the rock that sucked it up into space. But when I met with her again several days later, I asked if she still had some burden left. She said, yes, the part that is from her mom. So I asked my mom's capital S self to come in and asked her if it was okay if Pippen gave up her part. And she said yes. Um, but Pippen still seemed frightened to give it up. So I noticed other parts that kind of were holding their breath because they wanted her to give it up. They were like, please give it up so we can be out of pain, right? And I understand that that's not self. So I asked them to give me space so that I could be very patient with her and really check like what's her concern. And she said that her concern was with hell, that if she gave up her guilt, she would go to hell. She would die and go to hell. And I understood this burden, and I actually have a 3-year-old part who's the perfectionist part, whose fear was also hell. So I actually called her in. Her name is Chrissy, and I asked her to talk to Pippin and about her experience of giving up the burden of hell and how freeing that's been for her. And so that met her concern. And so she got like this tidal wave of water that doused the flames of hell and then flung hell up into heaven. But then it was still very concerned. She said, who will I be if I am not carrying this guilt? I've been carrying guilt all my life, responsibility for others all my life. Who will I be without this? And I told her, I'm not trying to get rid of you. You can be whatever you would like to be. You can take on a new role. And she was willing. And so that was when she allowed the rest of the boulder, the big rock mountain, to be chiseled away and pulled up into space. And once it was complete, she crumpled down to the ground and she invited light to come into her. She invited the qualities of the freedom to choose and to be responsible for herself, to have joy and presence. And I asked her what she wanted to be or where she wanted to be. And she said she wanted to be in the mountains. She wanted to be on top of the mountain instead of the mountain on top of her. And I asked, do you also, because this was a burden of being responsible for others. I said, do you also carry the guilt specifically of Ronald's death and that you deserve punishment for it? She said, yes. And it was like this giant yoke on her shoulders and her neck and around in this disc that cut through my head, which is really fascinating because a lot of my pain is in my neck and shoulders and head. And then a part came in that felt really angry about basically the religious burden that she was carrying and that it was not true. And then Reen came in and kind of karate chopped the yolk off and the part that went through her head. And together they burned it in the fire. And she felt free and light without this incredible guilt on her. And then I went back to Reen and I asked her how she felt, and she said she was convinced that Pippen was free now of this burden. I asked her what she would rather do, and she said dance, do Tai Chi, Qigong, and lively movement, which is fascinating because reading this now, I realize that since that day, I've been doing Qigong every day. My body just loves it and wants to do Qigong. It's like it craves it. And I'm like, oh, that's Reen. That's Reen's new job. That's so fascinating. Um, and I asked her, because she has all these minions under her that control different pain in my body. And I said, do they have the message? And she said, it's going to take a few days or weeks for me to really get the message to them. I said, okay, that's fine. Just let me know if I need to talk to any of them. And I said, are there any other parts who believe that they deserve punishment or pain? And she said, if they do, I want you to help unburden them. So if they do, I will alert you to them so you can go to them and help them too. So that was, again, just a really, Reen is taking on this very supportive role. So now the way I have very, very little pain now. And if and when I do have it, it's like an alert that says there's somebody here that needs attention, that needs help, or there's a part that's overriding the body, going towards something that's stressful, and I'm alerting you to it. So Reen has become just a very, very supportive part. And I know this is getting long. I just want to say one more thing about the second 6-year-old, because this was huge. This was one of the really helping unburden the 6-year-old that held guilt and shame, was just a huge root of the pain that was manifesting. And so that really, once that happened, I was significantly helped. But it was fascinating because a few days later, I was thinking about, again, this distinction between being responsible for loved ones versus feeling like I had to control everything in myself and everything outside myself. And that felt like a slightly different part. So I got curious about it. And that part also said they were 6. And that's when I remembered, oh, Reen said she protected 2 6-year-olds. And so this part was non-binary and said that they wanted to be called Sarge. And I asked, what kind of messages did you get? Like, how did you get this message that you have to control everything? And again, it feels like downloads of just these words that said, be above reproach, do not be out of control, be sober-minded as you ought, which is a verse, right? And then they said, there's the fear of hell, there's you've got to dot your I's and cross your T's in order to get approval from others. And just that having control keeps you safe. And the energy of this part, Sarge, was like very organized, very particular. Everything has to be in its place, has to be done a certain way. There's a lot of rules. There's a right way and a wrong way, right? And I have other parts that, again, that have responsibility for aspects of this, but this is like a really common theme. It's no wonder there are several parts. And I got curious because my people pleaser part is 6. Pippen, who I've been meeting with for weeks, is 6. And now Sarge is saying that they're 6. So I said, are you the same part as Cassandra and Pippen? And Sarge said, yes and no. And then I got this image in my head of kind of like a 3-headed hydra, or, like one body, 3 heads. And with Cassandra, Pippen, and Sarge. And they said, yeah, it's something like that. So since then, I have been meeting with the 4 and 5-year-olds, the 2 6-year-olds, Pippen and Sarge, and of course, Cassandra as well, and Reen. And it's just been incredible. And so thank you if you've stayed with me this long through the whole story. I know there's so much of it that I'm not telling you, because really for months it was like the pain demanded my attention. And looking back on it now, I do feel like it was so benevolent because it was screaming, it was saying, look at me, look at the roots. And as I journaled every day, what was truly alive in me is when these parts started really coming forward and the insight started coming. So in IFS, as we go deeper and we hear from parts, Dick Schwartz calls it insight. And one way to do that is to just journal. And I know Nicole Sachs says to do it for 20 minutes because to get through the layers, to really get to the parts that have been silenced, right? And to give them voice and let them speak. But when Pippen came forward, that was really, I mean, it's like all these puzzle pieces were coming together. And then when she came forward, it was like oh, I get it. I get it now. Like you really believe that you have to have physical pain all the time to feel worthy of living. And I just felt such compassion for her. So I hope that my example is helpful to you. Again, your system will not be exactly the same as mine. It's just meant to be an example and hopefully inspire you to really get curious, because what I do know is that your system makes sense. And if your body is producing pain, there is a reason for it, whether it's purely physical, purely based in trauma, or has layers of different things. You do make sense always. So please feel free to leave me any questions or comments in the comment section below.